for my presentation, I have researched invasive species. What is an invasive species, you might ask? An invasive species is a plant, animal, or other organism that is non-native to a location that causes damage or some sort of harm in its new location, and that is defined by the Defenders of Wildlife. Biologists and other scientists now commonly refer to invasions by exotic plants as one of the most serious problems facing native plant and wildlife populations in the United States. Why are invasive species bad? Invasive species have a large impact on the ecosystems they invade. They can affect the chemical makeup of the water, the availability of resources, and even alter the food web. Invasive species impact other species more directly through competition for resources, while native species are generally unable to compete with invasive species. Some common characteristics of successful invasive species. Invasive species have very few natural enemies, predators, and competitors. Because invasive species evolved with other competitors and native species evolved without invasive species, they lack the ability to compete with invasive species. This gives invasive species the upper hand when resources become scarce or not there. Many successful invasive species carry with them parasites or funguses that are unfamiliar to the new ecosystem, and in return are easily capable of taking over or even destroying native plants. Also, most all invasive plants have a very high productive rate as well as a long lifespan. Being able to produce faster than native plants and being able to outlive them only helps the invasion take place a lot easier. Also researched some North Carolina invasive species. In North Carolina alone, invasive species range from fungi to shrubs, fish, insects, and even certain types of coyotes. Some pretty important and damaging to our state have been the African honeybee, the brown tree snake, fire ants, and the chestnut blight, which is a fungus. Here I got some pictures of the chestnut blight, and I did a little more in-depth research on it. Chestnut blight is a fungal disease which virtually eliminated mature American chestnuts from the U.S. It was thought to have been brought into North America around the year 1904. The blight fungus is carried from tree to tree by small animals and insects who pick up and transport the infected spores from tree canker, on their feet, fur, and their feathers. The disease is also spread from tree to tree by wind and rain, so the conditions can affect it as well. It has been observed that a chestnut tree can die in as few as 4 days after being infected with the blight fungus. I thought that was pretty interesting. Within 40 years, nearly 4 billion strong American chestnut tree population in North America was devastated. Also spoke about the Africanized honeybee. We got some pictures as well. The Africanized honeybees, also known as the killer bees, are a hybrid of the western honeybee species. The African honeybee was first introduced to Brazil in the 1950s to help increase honey production. In 1957, 26 swarms accidentally escaped quarantine and have since spread throughout South and Central America, and then quickly arrived in North America in 1985. The Africanized honeybees will and can attack people and animals who unknowingly make their way into their territory or to near their hives. They are also much more aggressive than the native American honeybee. These attacks can and have resulted in a serious injury and sometimes even death. For the last North Carolina invasive species that I had researched was the red imported fire ant. You've probably seen these or come across these in your lifetime. The red imported fire ant is native to South America and is much more aggressive than most native ant species. Animals and humans both often come across them by accidentally stepping on one of the mounds, which causes the ants to swarm. It affects one and the others follow. and they attack in numbers. These invasive species threaten sleeping and bedridden individuals as well as pets. They've been known to cause damage to electrical equipment and farming equipment, can short them out and cause power outages. They also kill beneficial insects such as ground nesting bees. Fire ants feed on seeds, fruits, leaves, roots, bark, nectar, sap, and other fungi. Prevention and what we can do to help. In order to help and preserve our environment, we should not release any of our exotic pets or plants into our natural environment. It is also our responsibility to report any sighting of invasive species in our environment and call pet control. Drain out the water from our boats. Remove any debris that is hitched a ride on your boats from a natural environment. Anything from water to water can transport invasive species that can be damaging to other habitats or ecosystems. Next is invasive species laws. Invasive species populations kind of extend through geographic boundaries, so efforts to manage invasive species must be coordinated across the boundaries. Battling invasive species is not something that can be done by one agency and organization. Federal, state, and local governments, as well as non-governmental organizations, academic institutions, and the public, us, got to work together to control invasive species. 19 states now have invasive species councils, which is a step in the right process. Some federal laws. While no one law in particular addresses all the concerns of invasive species, many federal laws address some aspect of specific invasive species. So we have laws for certain of the organisms. One in particular that I found was the Lacey Act, and specifically is for the importation and interstate transport of animal species that are determined to be injurious by and may be regulated by the Secretary of Interior. And another example is the Asian Carp Prevention and Control Act, and this act prohibits the importation and shipment of certain species of carp. I enjoyed taking the time to research the topic of invasive species, and I feel that I have learned a lot. I understand how important it is for me to take action and help in this cause. The little things I can do that can help and protect our wildlife and natural environment is important to me, as I want my son to enjoy the beautiful landscapes we do have. Thank you for your time.